Hello and welcome to another Geography Updates video, and this time we're going to be looking at recent developments in China-Africa cooperation. From the 4th to the 6th of September 2024, Beijing hosted delegates from 53 out of the 54 African countries for the 9th summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, also known as FOCAC, an event which has been held every 3 years since the year 2000, with only Eswatini, the only African country, absent from the conference due to their diplomatic ties with Taiwan. The purpose of this conference is to arrange a series of meetings and strike deals between China and African nations on various subjects such as industrialization, agricultural advancements, security, and cooperation regarding China's Belt and Road Initiative. The official theme of the summit, encapsulated in the title, Joining Hands to Advance Modernization and Build a High-Level China-Africa Community with a Shared Future. As such, a lavish opening banquet was held for all the delegates, with an impressive opening ceremony and a keynote speech by Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. There were 4 general summits and several bilateral meetings organised, resulting in 30 new infrastructure projects being announced through the Belt and Road Initiative, further integrating Africa into Chinese supply chains. Previous summits have also helped Beijing to secure unparalleled access to Africa's raw materials in return for foreign direct investment. And this is borne by the statistics over that period. China is now Africa's biggest trade partner. A quarter of exports from Africa go to China. And this isn't one-way traffic either. 16% of imports into Africa originate from China. And that shift is reflected in the graphic on the left as well, and the declining influence of perhaps traditional major world economic powers and the growing influence of China across the continent. Between 2006 and 2021, China invested over $190 billion in Africa, mostly in the form of infrastructure projects linked to access to mineral resources. And it is projected by China that annual trade volumes between China and Africa could reach $300 billion by 2035 and have been growing very steadily at the same time that trade between America and Africa has sort of declined over that same period, showcasing the growing influence of China in this region and the reduction of influence of major world economic powers. Now, the summit has taken place against a backdrop of growing tensions between China and the West, notably America and Europe, over issues relating to a diverse range of topics: trade, espionage, international relations disputes, as well as China's political influence in Africa and around the world. Hosting the summit has provided a number of economic and political benefits for China. It has enhanced China's prominence on the world stage. It protects China's economic interests in the global economy and in the African continent by securing access to valuable raw materials that form an essential part of the supply chain for China's industrial activity, with access to lithium, copper and cobalt in countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe and Botswana. It also provides access to export markets for Chinese goods, as sort of growing sort of levels of development in different parts of Africa open up new markets for Chinese industrial goods to be sold into. It also increases China's diplomatic influence within the United Nations by building a strong cohort of allies tied economically and politically to China. This increases China's voting strength in the UN General Assembly and again elevates their power on a global scale, potentially at the expense of those traditional world powers. However, despite the investment opportunities that such deals provide for African countries, mostly directed into the construction of critical infrastructure to enhance connectivity into the global economy, critics argue that China's operating as a neo-colonial power, exploiting their position of strength to extract maximum value out of the deals that they negotiate, whilst failing to fully deliver on the promises of helping countries to better integrate into the global economy through diversification, enacting sectoral shift, and locking them in a debt trap which compounds pre-existing development challenges. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo leader Felix Tshisekedi, in his meeting with Xi Jinping, was trying to negotiate with Chinese companies to, rather than simply extract raw materials from the DRC, to refine those raw materials in the country, to enhance the prospects of diversification and a sectoral shift to boost the industrial sector of the DRC's economy, therefore increasing revenue potential and creating more opportunities for local people. Chinese investments have also been opposed at local levels. There are various reasons for this, such as environmental issues. This is a photograph of a recent protest by Ugandan activists who marched to the Chinese embassy in Kampala, capital of Uganda, to protest against an oil pipeline project that will transfer crude oil from Uganda to Tanzania, which is a joint venture between Chinese, Ugandan, Tanzanian governments, private investors such as the energy company Total as well, and it is set to be the longest heated pipeline in the world. But local communities say that it will displace thousands of people and have a detrimental effect on the environment. Environmental issues have also created protests in other parts of Africa too. This time in connection to illegal logging. The US Environmental Investigation Agency reported in May 24 that illegal timber transports from Mozambique to China have surged since 2017, with funds going to armed groups that facilitate political instability in the country. Another criticism often labelled at China is that they engage in a process of debt trap diplomacy, encouraging African countries to sign significant loan agreements that they then struggle to pay back, allowing China to seize lucrative assets in those countries. For example, Zambia defaulted on their loans with China. By the end of 2022, $18 billion of external debt had been accrued by Zambia, 12% of which was owed to China. In March 2024, an agreement was reached to restructure this debt with China and other creditors, which reduced the total by $840 million. However, other experts argue against the idea that China has a debt trap strategy. Its deals have been too numerous in the continent and too fragmented to really be classed as a coordinated strategy. And in fact, in Africa and in those countries themselves, there is often a preference for Chinese loans over loans from other global institutions such as the IMF or the World Bank, where such loans from these institutions of global economic governance often come attached with stringent conditionality related to environmental and human rights conditions, which are much less prevalent in China's loan arrangements. Despite these criticisms, China's interactions around the world have impacted its perception in a positive way and increasing its influence on a global scale. This is reflected in a report earlier this year on the state of Southeast Asia in 2024. The key highlights of the survey is that China has overtaken the USA as Southeast Asia's alignment country of choice. 43.9% of respondents selected China as the most influential political and strategic partner in Southeast Asia, which is up from 41.5% of respondents in 2023. Conversely, the USA only received such recognition from 25.8% of respondents, which was a big decline from the 31.9% in 2023. However, despite this, 45.5% of respondents expressed fear that China would use its strength to threaten their national interests and sovereignty. Furthermore, this is impacting the unity of the ASEAN trade bloc, with splits in countries along their diplomatic ties to either China or the West, with countries such as Indonesia, Brunei and Malaysia tilting increasingly towards China, whereas countries such as the Philippines, Vietnam and Singapore continue to see the US as better serving their strategic interests. Such developments informed a recent statement by the heads of the UK and US Foreign Intelligence Services, MI6, and the CIA in early September, stating that the international world order is under threat in a way we haven't seen since the Cold War, with the war in Ukraine, Russian sabotage in Europe and the US, the Israel-Gaza war, and a resurgence of Islamic State. The UK and US Foreign Intelligence Services perceive the rise of China as the main intelligence and geopolitical challenge of the century. Now, just to link in to where this particular update video is useful for BFI students in studying for Theme 2 of Geography, which looks at unequal integration and unequal development in a globalized world. There is many sort of components of this China-Africa relationship that can feed into the question that looks at the increasing power and influence of emerging countries and the extent to which that is changing the nature of global economic governance, with China's actions in Africa becoming more important and being seen as a more reliable partner than some of the traditional institutions of global economic governance and traditional major world economic powers. The issue of the causes of a lack of integration into the global economy is connected into this as well. The primary nature of many sub-Saharan African economies and the role that external actors play in either sort of maintaining these countries, low-income countries, in a state of underdevelopment, or whether they can act as a support, a help for elevating integration into the global economy, which then connects into the question that encourages you to examine different strategies that can help increase integration into the global economy, attracting foreign direct investment, working with TNCs, national governments, what can they do to attract the investment that can help further integration into global trade and into the global economy? What are the drawbacks of such strategies? If attracting foreign direct investment from China runs the risk of falling into greater debt, that's potentially detrimental to that country's integration into the global economy. And the question that evaluates the role of different actors in reducing global inequality. We've looked at major world powers, looking at emerging powers such as China, looking at private actors such as transnational corporations, national governments, a range of different actors present within that China-Africa dynamic that could be useful evidence for dealing with that particular question as well. Okay, I hope you found that update useful, and we'll be back with more updates very soon. Thank you.